Brian Townsend, thanks for being on the show.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
I've got your bio here. It's pretty extensive. I'm going to do my best to describe your sort of background. You were a retired supervisory special agent, the resident agent in charge with the DEA, where you spent 23 years. You actually have 28 years in law enforcement, 5 as a police officer in Missouri, and then, as I said, 23 with DEA, where you had a variety of assignments. You served in enforcement operations, did undercover work, and you managed the DEA's special training unit in Quantico, Virginia. Quite an impressive career, Brian. Thanks for being with us.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity.
You're also involved in Eagle 6 training. You're still super busy. You were here at a Chicago gang conference. You are involved in the Organized Crime Information Center in the Midwest states. And you're also on the board of directors of the Drug Enforcement Association, Federal Narcotics Agents. I don't know how you have time to do all these things. And then finally, you just started a nonprofit organization called Only 2 Milligrams. And that nonprofit's to raise awareness on fentanyl. You're busy guy.
Busy. I don't like to sleep, apparently.
Yeah. I like to start off with a gift. And from one founder to the other founder, I really root for founders. And it's super hard to do what you're doing at the Only 2 Milligrams Foundation. This is a donation to your foundation. I try to think about what could I get Brian from Kansas City. And I thought about doing some Chiefs stuff, but I'm not a big fan of the Chiefs and didn't want to be seen purchasing those jerseys. So anyway, I thought that would be most impactful and helpful to you.
Yeah, thank you. It's definitely going to help us with our mission, so thank you.
Yeah, and I know we're going to get to the Only 2 Milligram Foundation and learn more about that. Brian, the reason I wanted to have you on the show is because you are one of the most knowledgeable people of fentanyl, from the supply chain to the economics, to how the cartel moves it into the U.S., to the relationship between China and the U.S. And we wanted to set aside 2 hours because this is a big topic. There's a lot to get into here, and you are the world's expert at fentanyl. And so I really appreciate you being here.
Yeah, looking forward to the conversation.
Can we start with just the fentanyl supply chain? Will you just walk us through, where does it come from?
Primary country that it originates from is China. So they'll send the precursor chemicals to typically Mexico, not only Mexico, but typically Mexico, right into the ports. They'll put them on cargo ships, they'll come right into the ports, and then from the ports, they'll be moved to various locations around Mexico, mass produced into fentanyl. They do the same thing with methamphetamine, and then they'll smuggle it into the U.S.
Why do you think China, is it because China's like the pharmaceutical company of the world and they just have so many chemicals and drugs there? Why is it China that's producing the precursors?
I think it goes a little deeper than that. I think China, if you look at the history of China, they were devastated by opioids, opium, back in the 1800s, countries like England and France, and in fact, they went to war twice over opium, and their feelings on drugs are a lot different. And I think this is really a little bit of payback, and they're not our ally, right? And this is a way that, how else can you kill hundreds of thousands of people in a very just nasty way by flooding our streets with this poison.
Mm-hmm. So you think there's a strategic element to this, which I'm really excited to get into. But China, these precursor chemicals, what exactly are they? Are they illegal in China? What are the penalties if you get caught with them in China?
So prior to 2019, they would actually just manufacture fentanyl, and they would send it to places like the United States or Mexico, to the cartels. In 2019, President Xi at the time says, okay, we're gonna outlaw the actual product, but you can send the precursor chemicals to make the product to the West. And that's exactly what they did. So the analogy I always use is, imagine that we're selling brownies and everything goes well, but for some reason someone doesn't want us to ship brownies across the country. Well, then we'll just ship the eggs and the flour and all the ingredients and let you make the brownies. We'll give you the recipe. And that's exactly what they've done. So from their perspective, it's great. In fact, we've even found out that they're being incentivized. Their government is incentivizing their chemical companies, rewarding them, saying, hey, good job, here's tax breaks or some type of kickback. And in fact, our Congress, a bipartisan committee, found that was happening in China. They are they're devastating our country with these chemicals, and that's producing not only fentanyl but methamphetamine.
What if you are? Can you compare the laws? Like in China, if you're caught with fentanyl, are you executed? Do you go to prison for life? How does that compare to the laws here?
Yeah, their laws are a lot more severe. Their punishments a lot more. The consequences are a lot more severe. Here it's really depending on where you are, right? You may even have a prosecutor that doesn't want to do anything here, but in China it's a lot more. The consequences are absolutely more severe.
So China is the world's producer of fentanyl. They provide the precursors, and they send that to the Mexican cartels, presumably like maritime shipping, right over the oceans, probably the Pacific ports.
Absolutely, they are number one in the world. Number two is India, and there are some other countries as well that are involved with shipping the chemicals. But yeah, maritime. The ports in Mexico are their primary destination. We do know that there's some mid-shipment points. South Africa, for instance, we've seen an increase there. A lot of seizures there as well, where it's just there's storage. They'll ship it there, and then from there to go to different locations across the world. But ultimately, their biggest customer has been the cartels, specifically the Sinaloa cartel and the Cartel Jalisco New Generation, both in Mexico, and really large transnational criminal organizations that don't just operate in Mexico; they operate across the world, and they're responsible for most of the fentanyl trafficking.
And is it Chinese organized crime that will interact and broker between the cartel, or is the Chinese government directly involved?
My belief is that the Chinese government, in the way of incentivizing these chemicals from coming over. I mean, they reward them. I mean, hey, good job, you've sent so many pounds or tons. We're gonna give you a tax break, or we're gonna give you a kickback. How do you? That's complicit, right? How do you not say they're involved when we know they have publicly done this to their companies? Yeah. They've rewarded them.
And it's just like such a cat and mouse game, right? Like these precursors, you can change a chemical. The U.S. can outlaw or ban something, and then you can change a molecule, and suddenly that particular product's not illegal anymore.
Correct. And it's kind of like a whack-a-mole, right? You identify a chemical structure and you outlaw it, and then they just change it by one molecule, right? And then we're behind the curve because it takes us time to catch up to that and ban it or regulate it in some way. And then by then they've already done 3 or 4 new ones. But the other difference is in places like Mexico, their chemical regulations are much different than in the United States. So that's another reason why there's a freer flow of some of these chemicals into Mexico as opposed to the U.S.
Okay, so these precursors, they get to Mexico, and they come in through the ports, and they're pressed into pills or stay in powder form by the cartels. Which cartels are controlling the fentanyl trade?
So the primary 2 cartels are the Cartel de Sinaloa, CDS, El Chapo. I think most people know him. He's in the U.S.
He was arrested.
Custody now. He's been convicted, and he's in prison, the Bureau of Prisons here in the United States. And then you have the CJNG, the Cartel Jalisco New Generation. Now they're all involved. All the cartels are involved in polydrug organizations, and if they can make money on fentanyl, they certainly will. But those are the 2 main organizations. And they'll make the finished product. Sometimes the product itself, the powder, will come over the border, and sometimes they'll press them into pills, and those come over the border. So we see both. The object is just to get it into the U.S.
You mentioned El Chapo, who was arrested in 2016, and New Generation's leaders, is it Menche?
El Mencho, yeah.
And he's former law enforcement officer. Is that correct? He's former police officer, I believe.
Well, I didn't know that. I know he was raised in the United States, but I didn't know that was
I think he has a law enforcement background.
Oh, interesting. Well, he certainly, you find him, you're $15 million richer.
Oh, is he top 10 now?
He is. He absolutely is. If anybody knows where he is,
And so how has fentanyl impacted these cartels? I would imagine, Sinaloa is an older cartel. New Generation, probably after El Chapo went down, they've probably exploded in popularity. What are the dynamics happening between the 2 cartels?
Yeah, a lot of dynamics. Let me give you a little bit of history real quick on fentanyl with them and why they really took over. So back in the 1990s and early 2000s, we had an explosion of meth labs in the United States. I mean, they were the little mom and pop meth labs, one pot, the different terminology we'd use. And we had to figure out how we're going to put our hands around this, right? How are we going to stop this? So we started to regulate chemicals like ephedrine. And to this day, if you need like the good Sudafed, not the stuff on the shelf, but the good stuff, you have to talk to your pharmacist. You have to give them your driver's license. You fill a little, sign the little thing, and you get the Sudafed, right? And meth labs in the United States, meth lab production in the United States dropped. I mean, it just dropped. Where we had, hundreds a month to, maybe one a month now, if that, and that was a good thing. But the cartels were trying to figure out how they could wrap their greedy fingers around methamphetamine. So they contacted chemical suppliers in places like China and says, hey, can we get this stuff? Can you bulk ship this to us? And that's where it really started. So they started bulk shipping these chemicals into Mexico, mass producing methamphetamine and smuggling it to the US because they're very good at smuggling drugs. And to give you an idea of how much control they took over methamphetamine, I worked on the border with DEA from 2009 to 2016, and we were paying about $22,000 a pound for methamphetamine. Because of this, because they took over the meth trade and just mass produced it and just saturated the United States with it, methamphetamine at the border right now costs about $750 a pound. In the Midwest, a pound on the street here, about $2,500. And here in Chicago, it's probably even cheaper. So, I mean, they just saturated the country. So when fentanyl was a needed product, they needed to cut heroin originally, is why fentanyl, or how fentanyl got into our drug supply. They thought, hey, well, that's great. We'll call the same people we're calling for the chemicals for methamphetamine, and we'll bulk ship those into our ports, and we'll mass produce fentanyl, and we'll smuggle it in the same routes that we've been doing for methamphetamine, cocaine, and heroin, and marijuana. And that's exactly what they've done. They just took over. So they had the model in place because of methamphetamine, and they just took over. So these two organizations, the Sinaloa cartel and the CJAG, they hate each other. I mean, they're arch rivals. Because of El Chapo's arrest, it's pretty interesting, fascinating to me what's happening now, the inner workings. It was really kind of an umbrella of power in the Sinaloa cartel. Everyone thinks it was just his kids, his Los Chopitos. And obviously they were involved in the hierarchy and the leadership of the organization with Dad's arrest and conviction here in the US. But they were working with other folks, including El Mayo. And El Mayo, which is his nickname, Zambada Garcia, was kind of the right-hand man of El Chapo. Well, I don't remember the date, but within the last year, he kind of woke up on an airplane in the United States. He didn't want to be in the U.S., right? And one of the El Chapo's sons was also on the airplane. And of course, the airplane lands in the U.S. and he's greeted by law enforcement, and now he's in federal custody and looking at some very serious charges. Well, people that are loyal to him, his friends and family, they believe that the kids, Los Chopitos, have cooperated. And that's why he ended up on an airplane inbound for the U.S. So that caused some infighting within the Sinaloa cartel. And it's gotten really bad over the last, I'd say, 6 months or so. And so bad, in fact, that the remaining kids that are out, Los Chopitos, have now got into bed with the CJ&G. And that's a big deal. That's like the Bloods and the Crips, having a barbecue together. It just doesn't happen, right? So because of that, they had to actually give various territory around Mexico. They had to cede territory to the CJ&G. So both organizations are still strong and powerful, but I think I could make an argument now that CJ&G is a bit more powerful because of the infighting within the Sinaloa cartel. But everyone knows the Sinaloa, everyone knows El Chapo, everyone knows that story. So
getting into the details of like El Chapo's arrest, are you like implying that he was on a plane and didn't know he was going to the U.S.? Is that how we got him?
Yeah, El Mayo. Yeah, that's exactly right. In fact, if you listen to his attorney talk, he's upset with the United States government, federal law enforcement, DEA, and there's just a lot of talk. And so the feeling is that the kids have are cooperating with the U.S. government. Mm-hmm. And because of that, El Mayo wakes up one day on an airplane. He had no intention of coming into the U.S. because he's wanted in the U.S. And now I think he's in his early 70s, but he'll more than likely die in U.S. prison now.
Can you tell us about this new generation cartel? I've read that they've got drones, IEDs, 50 cals. These guys drive armored tanks down the street. But this isn't like some typical gang. I mean, this is, by all accounts, this is like a military that happens to be making $10 billion a year doing narco.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And you could actually make that same argument for all the cartels in Mexico. I mean, I always, when I talk to people about cartels, I say, look, these aren't just a bunch of idiots. I mean, obviously, there are probably some idiots in there, and I don't agree with their behavior, but this is a sophisticated operation, and they're highly adaptive. They don't have laws. They don't have morals. They don't have values. You know, like we were talking about the whack-a-mole game earlier. I mean, they're constantly a couple steps ahead of us, and when we catch up to them, you know, they're already, you know, they got their tentacles in 8 different places already. They're very violent. You know, there's no manuals. It's all, you know, everything's implied. They know how to operate. You know, if you cooperate with law enforcement, you're going to die. Your family's going to die. You know, everything is based on violence and money, and the money is just absurd. I mean, they don't care who they hurt. And you hear it in interviews all the time. You know, hey, they're the ones who are willing to take this poison. Then, you know, so be it. Someone has to sell it to them. So why can't that be me? Mm-hmm. You know, that drug trafficking, that drug dealer mentality. But yeah, I mean, the armored vehicles. I mean, I've seen patches before with the cartels, the Gulf Cartel, Los Zetas, CDS. I mean, it's incredible. The drones, the communications. I mean. This is a little military, is what it is.
Yeah, they're super squared away.
Absolutely.
And 10 to 20 billion a year. I mean, they could be listed on one of our public exchanges. They could be included in the Dow Jones Industrial Average. It's a very big company.
Yeah, Warren Buffett's and the Jeff Bezos and the Elon Musk, the money they have. I mean, you could easily put a couple of the drug kingpins in that same list, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm. So cursors come in through these Pacific ports. Tell me about these labs. What are they doing? They get the powders, and how do the labs work down there?
So they're usually pretty dirty. A lot of times they're, you know, outdoor areas or warehouses, or sometimes just houses, you know, just run down houses, and they'll just use the stoves to cook this stuff. And there's no quality control. There's no people with the lab coats walking around with PhDs. You know, I'm sure they're looking for folks like that. In fact, it was interesting. New York Times did an article about a year ago where they were actually recruiting college kids, chemistry students, to cook for the cartels. And they had a couple interviews of some of the ones that were willing to obviously anonymously talk about their experience. You know, making thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars cooking dope for the cartels. But again, no quality control, no even distribution of drugs like fentanyl. It's just, if you look at the photos and the seizures, I mean, there's just very dirty operations, and it's typical drug operation.
Probably very remote operations, right? Rural, mobile, not like growing coke or heroin, right? You can just synthetically create this drug and move your mobile lab around in the mountains.
Absolutely, very mobile. Very remote, typically, but sometimes they'll just go into houses as well, and just, like you said, they have the ability to make the dope and move if they need to.
Do you find any labs here in the U.S., or are they mostly down in Mexico?
What we're seeing in the U.S. is tableting labs or capsule labs. So we've seen some labs in Canada. They have some very progressive drug laws in Canada and starting to really bite them on the butt a little bit. But I'd say 99.9% of the actual labs to produce fentanyl are in Mexico. In the United States, you'll take the powder and you can push it into a pill or into a capsule. So we see a lot of tableting labs. In fact, the last couple of labs I went into prior to my retirement were tableting labs. They were, pressing pills, or they would making capsules. That's pretty common in the United States. If I were someone who would be involved in drug trafficking at that level, I could go on the dark web and I can pick up a kilo of fentanyl, finished product fentanyl, for $5,000, you know, or if I had a contact in Mexico, probably even cheaper, you know, to do that. So why would I go through all the trouble of smuggling those chemicals, regulated chemicals, into the United States, figuring out how to produce this stuff, which I don't think is difficult, but it's still a process. And then, you know, hopefully yield enough product that I could then make pills or capsules or sell the powder itself. When I can get the finished product for dirt cheap and then either sell that or, like I said, turn it into a pill or a capsule.
I didn't realize that there's labs up in Canada.
Oh, yeah.
You guys seeing fentanyl flowing from the northern border now as well?
Yes, but not as much as some of the things we hear on the news. I mean, if you look at I don't know the exact numbers, but if you look at the seizures between the southern and northern border, I mean, it's significantly different. I mean, I would say 99% of the drugs come through the southern border. Yeah. So I mean, do we see an increase? Have we seen an increase in Canada? Yeah, but it's not to the rate, not even close to what we see on the southern border.
Is it accurate to say that the civil war between these cartels and is it over fentanyl routes? Is it just the explosion of this new profitable business, and it's over the fentanyl routes and probably the ports?
Absolutely, definitely fentanyl involved, but also methamphetamine. There's still quite a bit of cocaine smuggling as well. In fact, we've seen an increase in cocaine smuggling. We still see some marijuana here and there as well. So yeah, I mean, everything's about territory in Mexico. I mean, a lot of the violence is about, on the border, we call them plazas. If we are a cartel and we control a certain area, like let's say Sinaloa, which is in the western part of Mexico, near the Pacific Ocean, just below California there, everything that happens there, everything, we're going to be responsible for, or we're going to get a piece of. So if another organization wants to move, I don't know, some weapons through there or some people through there, it's our territory. They're going to pay us, So, and if they don't, then they're going to lose their lives. So that's a big money maker right there alone. So these cartels are always fighting for control, of their areas. I mean, these are huge smuggling routes ultimately into the United States, which is, the number one customer.
If you were to describe or break down the cartel's revenue, is it roughly like 50% fentanyl now, and then 30% meth, or 20% coke? Like, how would you break down that?
That's a tough one. Meth is still the number one drug seized in the United States. So, you can make the argument that they're probably still making more money from methamphetamine. But fentanyl is certainly growing. In fact, we've seen a significant increase over the last 10 years. I don't know how to break that down into really good numbers, but I mean, I don't know, 25, 30% at least from fentanyl and meth. It's huge revenue.
How do you think about like the legalization of marijuana that happened in the U.S. And that they lost that revenue, of course, and was that a catalyst to sort of move into the fentanyl trade as well?
It certainly didn't hurt. I mean, they're not going to lose money, right? But they've actually done well with marijuana. We've seen an increase in cartel operations in the United States, especially around the states that legalized marijuana. Not only the Mexican cartels, but we've seen an increase in Chinese organized crime. In fact, they're the number one, I know this is marijuana, not fentanyl, but they're the number one bad actor in the legal marijuana trade. So we've actually seen an increase. But yeah, I think they have to they're very, very adaptive, right? I mean, they have to find ways to make money. And if they feel like they're going to lose money from marijuana, then which they're not, they're gonna figure out other ways to supplement their income, and they certainly have done that with fentanyl.
We're here in Illinois where marijuana is legal. There's these dispensaries everywhere, especially in Chicago. Brian, you're saying that the dispensaries, like that there's Chinese organized crime elements heavily involved in the marijuana dispensaries?
Yes, or around the state. So whether the dispensaries or whether they're just operating in and around these areas, because they're taking advantage of, one is probably a lack of regulation. I can tell you from my perspective, working with law enforcement across the United States, we're not going in there counting plants. We're not going in there looking at doing any type of quality control, and very few people are. So a lot of these unscrupulous folks, not all of them, but a lot of them are taking advantage of that, right? So let's say the law says you can grow 6 plants. I mean, we've heard of stories where there's 6,000 plants, right? Because no one's going in and checking these numbers. And, the states around it, I don't know, I have to look at the map or what's legalized. If marijuana is legalized in, Wisconsin and in the other states that you border here in Illinois, but I'd certainly believe, because we see it in other states, that they're also moving this marijuana to those areas as well. So yeah, absolutely, they are heavily involved in the marijuana trade.
Brian, just back to the Mexican cartels. Who's smuggling fentanyl across the border? Is it U.S. citizens going across, or what are their tactics?
So, the most common courier for fentanyl is a white female U.S. citizen.
White female U.S. citizen because she's clean, or?
Well, I mean, U.S. citizens are typically less apt to be searched at the border, and they'll just go through the regular point of entries that if you and I were going to go to Mexico today and we drive over the border, let's say we're in McAllen and we want to go across the border into Reynosa, those same roads and highways are where most drugs come into the United States.
Yeah, that's interesting. So so it's humans walking it across or driving it across.
Absolutely,
it's not some elaborate operation where they're dropping drone packages.
That
tunnels.
happens.
It's probably a very small percentage, though.
I think so. We don't know the exact percentage because I'm sure we're not catching, probably 75% of what comes over. But we see the tunnels, we see the drones, and we certainly see an increase in maritime operations, the fast boats, both the Pacific and Atlantic Ocean, Canada. Well, that's a pretty low number. The biggest way drugs come into the United States are the same roads and highways that we would take to and from Mexico. They overwhelm our resources, especially over the last 4 or 5 years. They've absolutely overwhelmed our resources.
And how do you detect fentanyl?
It's tough. I mean, Border Patrol has done a really good job. In fact, we've seen an increase in seizures, but it's like methamphetamine and other drugs. They've just saturated our border. I mean, they send 10 cars through and you get one and you high five each other because you just took 1,000 pounds off, but 9 more just went through, and it only takes one of those vehicles to get through and for they're making a profit. Mm-hmm. They're just very good at doing this. And you think about the pills are small, right? I mean, how many times have we seen cars with just 50, 60,000 pills in it? And it's not even a suitcase. I mean, it's a very, very small volume, right? And we see that constantly in cars and trucks at our border.
So hidden compartments, is it difficult for the dogs to hit on fentanyl pill? No.
Yeah, well, that's an interesting, we've seen more dogs being introduced. In fact, I think Border Patrol just has its first team of dogs out in the last couple months that are specifically for fentanyl. But a lot of these dogs are polydrug, they're hitting on cocaine, methamphetamine, and a lot of these organizations, they're typically moving more than just one drug, or at least they're involved in the distribution of more than one drug. I've never seen an organization that says we're only cocaine, we're only methamphetamine. They make money. They're going to make money in any way possible. But we certainly see a lot of dogs and just human interaction. If you've ever been to the border or a checkpoint, you go through and the Border Patrol officer makes contact with let's say the driver of a vehicle. And they're looking for that human interaction, any signs of nervousness, things like that. And if anything tips them off, then they'll put them usually in a secondary area. So now we have a little bit more inspection, and that might even be an X-ray, which we call a backscatter. It looks like a human X-ray, like if we went to the hospital right now, where they'll actually X-ray the vehicle and they'll look for voids. They'll look for concealed drugs or maybe even people. So.
Any other? Is there any use of AI technology in any detection of fentanyl?
Yeah, absolutely, and I think that's going to increase. 100% going to increase as we figure out how do we take that image and I don't want to say remove the human from it, but how do we use technology like AI to look at an image like this? Let's say an X-ray of a vehicle, and be able to say within a couple seconds, like AI does, that this area right here needs further inspection. This does not look right. And and I'm sure that you could put in there, hey, this is a 2025 Ford F-150, and it knows what that looks like internally. And then when it looks at an X-ray and says, okay, something's wrong here, it can pinpoint. And I think that's what we're going to see more and more of how we can utilize technology, especially AI, to really pinpoint and help us be more effective in all aspects of this.
Brian, can we go into the economics now of fentanyl? I really like talking to you, especially about just how the price of fentanyl has declined so dramatically and how profitable it is now. Can you put this in perspective for us?
Yeah, it costs them pennies to make. There was a DEA operation that I was told about. A friend of mine was part of it. It was out west. It doesn't really matter where it was, but it was a DEA operation, and they had an informant, and they were making a purchase of fentanyl from a bad guy, and he was a low-level member of the Sinaloa cartel. And I love this story because it's going to show you the cost here. So they made a purchase of about 5,000 pills, and when they get back, there was about 6,000 pills there. So they're all scratching their head going, what happened? We only ordered 5,000, but he delivered 6. And no, drug dealers don't deliver more. In fact, they usually deliver less, right? So there was a phone call made to the bad guy. It was like, hey, what happened here? You gave us 1,000 extra pills. And his words, and I quote here, are, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. So that extra 1,000 pills probably cost them $10, literally $10 to produce.
Not worth the gas money to turn around and go get it.
Exactly, it's not worth the gas. So, you think about that. Another $10 to give another. If we were going to go buy cocaine right now, let's say we're going to go buy an 8-ball of coke or meth or something like that, and the dealer said, "Hey, here's a half pound. Here's a pound. Don't worry." It would never happen in a million years. It would just never happen. But for them to give us an extra 1,000 pills with the very cavalier, don't worry about it. It's pennies to make. And in fact, I would say that depending on your distribution chain and how how your organization's working, several layers are going to make a lot of money. When it finally gets to its user, that might be in a nightclub for $25, $30 a pill, where this originally was 2 cents a pill to manufacture. And then let's say I'm selling 1,000 or 5,000 pills for 10, 15 cents a pill, which is a good profit for me if I'm only producing them at 2 cents a pill. It's a good purchase for the next guy, and he's selling them, let's say, for $1 a pill, right? And again, several layers of people making money, and it's incredible to see how it's saturated our market here.
In Mexico, the cartels, what do you think, if you were to factor in what the precursors cost, in order for them to make a kilo of fentanyl, what does that cost the Mexican cartel up front, and then what can they make on that kilo?
So a kilo, which is 2.2 pounds, on the dark web is anywhere from about $3,000 to $5,000. And there's a profit in there. So I would estimate that the cartel is probably making a kilo for $500. I don't know what the exact amount is right now. It fluctuates a little bit. But $500 for a kilo, where if you could sell it, most people aren't going to sell kilo quantities, even in Chicago. You're going to sell pills or grams or ounces or something like that. But if you sold a kilo up here, you're probably going to sell it for $30,000, $40,000. Maybe not in Chicago, probably a little lower here. But let's say let's say you travel a little further north and you're in Wisconsin Dells, and you might pay $40,000 up there, right? Or $45,000. But from a $500 initial investment, it's pretty good.
That's just for the powder, though, right? But if you were to sell like every single pill, if you were to just convert that powder into pills and step on it a whole bunch of times.
Yeah. The one example I always give is a kilo is 2.2 pounds. A kilo is 1,000,000 milligrams. Okay. And if I were a drug dealer and I made 1 milligram pills, knowing that 2 milligrams is a deadly dose, if I made 1 milligram pills, that would mean I would have enough for 1 million pills. 1 million milligrams, 1 million pills. And let's say I sold them for $10 a pill. That's $10 million profit right there. And that's, I have to buy the kilo before I, break it down into 1 milligram pills, but I'm $5,000 in there, and I can get a pill press for about $1,200, some dyes, some casts, some other things I'm going to need. I'm probably all in for maybe 10, 12 grand for a potential $10 million investment, or return on my investment, my ROI. In fact, Reuters, a news agency, they did just that. So they set up a mailing address in Mexico and also in the United States, and they purchased about $3,600 worth of products to make fentanyl. And they showed that they could make about $3 million worth of fentanyl for that $3,600 investment.
Wow.
So I always tell people, don't you think there's criminal organizations out there who are like, I can eliminate the cartels, I can eliminate all the other folks that I'm dealing with, and I can have my own little group. I can, for a couple $1,000s, for less than $10,000, I can have, the potential to make millions of dollars. This is happening.
It's not surprising that hearing the economics of fentanyl, to hear that the cartels are fractioning into these civil wars, people are competing, especially when you consider that it's designed and built in a mobile lab.
Yeah.
And you don't have to wait 4 months to grow poppies or cocoa plants,
Yeah.
and you can move these things around and you can put together your kilo of fentanyl, presumably within weeks.
Yeah, very quick. It's so much different than natural opioids. Heroin. You need the poppy, right? You bury you put the seed in the ground. You put some soil around it. It has the water and the sun, and you get a poppy plant, and you get the pod, and from that pod you have raw opium, and from raw opium you get to morphine, and from morphine there's a chemical synthesis involved, but you get to heroin. But that's a process, right? That takes time. With fentanyl, it's synthetics, completely man-made. So we're talking about putting some chemicals together and just a matter of time for those chemicals to react, where you have a finished, very potent product that costs you a lot less. And even just the logistics involved in this whole operation are a lot easier than it is, growing a plant and, harvesting and all that stuff. So yeah, I mean, the dollars are huge. They really are. And this is why these organizations are so violent, right? They have to stay on top of this game because they're bringing in billions of dollars.
Let's talk about the demand side. Why does the demand exist in the United States at the level that it does, much more than any other country in the world?
Yeah, and that's a frustrating thing. And in fact, if you ask me, how do we end the war on drugs, which I don't like that term, but we would have to end the demand, right? I heard a story, I don't know if it's true or not, but when El Chapo was arrested, they allegedly said, hey, how would you ever stop selling drugs in the United States? Or would you ever stop selling drugs? And he said, when the United States stops buying, I would. And I don't know if it's true or not, but it's powerful, right? And in the US, we make up about 4.25% of the world's population. So a little over 4% of the world's population is the United States. Yet we consume the majority of the drugs. And there are folks out there who they're making these new synthetics, all the time, and there are people willing to put these poisons in their body. And until we don't like we talked about China and the cartels. I don't like any of those folks, and I think we need to put them in jail. But until we actually reduce the demand, there's always going to be these bad actors willing to supply. It's the simple economics, right? I mean, if you have a demand, there will be a supply.
How did this demand originate? Was it heroin demand that moved to fentanyl?
As far as fentanyl goes,
Yeah.
So that's an interesting history. So if you look at our history, really, I'll start you in the late 1800s. Opium and morphine first really hit us hard in the U.S. because of the Civil War, 1861 to 1865. So we were treating all of our soldiers with opium and morphine. In fact, if you look at all the data out there, and the North kept some pretty good data, the South really didn't. But I read once that we gave our soldiers 10 million opium pills. So when they left the war, they left with an addiction, a substance use disorder, to morphine, to opium. And we called it soldier's disease or army's disease. And it was the first time in this country's history, young history, I should say, right, that we ever saw widespread addiction. Absolutely just devastated us. And then opium use just got worse and worse and worse. I read one statistic that 1 in 200 Americans by 1895 had some type of problem with opium. That's phenomenal. And then, it wasn't just opium, morphine, cocaine, cocaine extract was in, red wines. It was in our product, Coca-Cola. So we had a growing demand for drugs. And then Bayer said, hey, we have a solution for this, Bayer Pharmaceutical. And I think this was around 1895, again, late 1800s. And they said, we think we can cure morphine addiction. So they make a product, and it was heroin. So they actually created heroin.
Wow.
Interesting, since I mentioned that, they also invented aspirin around the same time period, maybe 2 or 3 years later. And you needed a prescription for aspirin. For heroin, you could pick it up anywhere. And now it didn't take us long to realize that this was not a cure for morphine addiction. In fact, it was worse. So now we have opium, we have morphine, we have heroin, we have cocaine. We had a growing amount of product. And it really changed the way that we were looking at drugs in this country. In fact, there was a series of laws in the early 1900s. In fact, the first federal ban of any drug was opium. was 1909, I believe. And then we finally had the Harrison Narcotics Act passed, and then we had pretty much a full-on ban on drugs by about 1915, 1920-ish time period. But the problem is, and I said it before, is we had a demand for it. We came into the early 1900s with opium, morphine, cocaine, heroin. I mean, we liked our drugs in this country. So even though the government was like, we know this is bad, we're going to make it illegal, the cat was out of the bag. We had this demand. So that goes all the way up into the mid-1990s, the Purdue story. If anybody's heard of the Sackler family, that really plays into this whole story. We had this taste for drugs early on, and we were using these drugs. But within the medical community, which is different from the street drug use, we weren't really treating pain. I mean, we were treating pain, but it wasn't like we would do in the mid-1990s. In the mid-1990s, we convinced the pharmaceutical community convinced the medical community that we needed to add a fifth vital sign, pain. And that's exactly what we did in 1996.
A fifth vital sign.
A fifth vital sign in the medical community. So vital signs like heart rate.
Isn't that subjective, though? I just ask you.
I think it is.
What your pain level is?
Well, yeah, absolutely, it is subjective. And that's what happens now. After 1996, you go to a physician and you say you're in pain. It's, what are they going to ask you on a scale of 1 to 10, or on the little smiley faces or frown faces, where are you? And you're going to say, I'm an 8. Prior to 1996, they're looking for a bone sticking out of your body. They're looking for a way for they could measure the pain. Now, I know there's some exceptions, and I know some people game the system, and there's probably some bad physicians out there, but for the most part, as a whole, as a medical community, they really changed the way we looked at pain, because we were convinced by the pharmaceutical industry, Purdue leading the charge, that these were safe, that everyone's going to be okay. So not only did they get us to change the way we manage pain, they started to flood the market, and that's when OxyContin was released. Oxy meaning oxycodone, which is a very powerful opioid, and contin meaning continuous. So it was supposed to release in your body over a 12-hour period of time. And a lot of people are familiar with like the patches, fentanyl patches, same concept, where you put the patch on and over a long period of time, you get your relief. So almost overnight, people were really devastated by OxyContin, but we were led to believe that it was safe. So we started to just give it out like it was candy. And it wasn't just OxyContin, there was a lot of drugs out there. But you had your wisdom teeth taken out, and you probably went home with 30, 60, 90 pills, no questions asked. You didn't have to tell the physician you were in pain. So it changed the way we fundamentally looked at pain management in this country from a medical perspective. We were still abusing, heroin and opioids on the street, but from a medical perspective. And that would really blow up what we would see on the street.
I see.
Absolutely blow it up. In fact, by 2012, which was kind of the height of the legal opioid crisis, I should say, to give you some statistics, 81.3 prescriptions per 100 people in this country. 81.3 opioid prescriptions, legal opioid prescriptions per 100 people. Not 100,000, not 100 million, but 100 people. Yeah, absolutely. And that's when our government was like, whoa, time out here. I think we got to put the gates on here a little bit. Well, the problem is now people, like I said, they were going home with 30, 60, 90 pills, and no questions asked. So they were getting used to these pills. In fact, in OxyContin, a lot of folks realized pretty quick that you could get the pill wet, you could crush it, and you could snort it, and you can get the entire 12-hour instantly. So if your doctor wised up and says, okay, I think this was a mistake, we need to wean you off or cut you off, what did you do? You went to other doctors. In fact, to this day, we have, now we have the prescription monitoring program. So if you go to a physician today, whether you know it or not, he or she's going to run your name in the system, make sure you're not doctor shopping for opioids and things like that. That was because that was happening back then. Or they would get in their car and they would just drive around the region and doctor shop, and the pain management clinics popped up, the pill mills as we call them. So all this was as a result of us changing the way we fundamentally treated pain in the medical community. I mean, it had a devastating impact. In fact, if you look at the number of people dying from drugs in this country, I mean, a relatively horizontal line of overdose deaths, I call them drug poisonings. And then it starts to bend in the late 1990s. That's legal opioids. So now the market is saturated with legal opioids. If people can't get enough, they're doctor shopping. If they have problems doing that, what do? They turn to the streets. We saw heroin use quadruple in this country, quadruple. We hadn't seen that type of spike in heroin since the Vietnam War. So now heroin is, it is flooding the United States. Heroin production's up. There is a huge demand for heroin. So the cartels have to adjust. They can't make it fast enough. So this long story I'm giving you is how fentanyl got into our drug supply, because the cartel said, okay, the United States needs more heroin.
We're in like 2012 now at this point, right?
We're about 2012, absolutely. Yeah.
Can't keep up with fentanyl or opioid demand, heroin demand.
We can't keep up with opium demand. Again, if you can't get it from a pain management clinic or from a series of doctors or your doctor, then you're turning to the streets for opioids, to include heroin. Heroin's an opioid. It's the most powerful opioid at the time. And so we see heroin use, increase significantly, 2010, 2011, 2012 time period. I remember at DEA, we started working heroin cases in my office, and we hadn't worked, I think I'd worked one prior to then. Most of my work was, cocaine, methamphetamine, marijuana, other drugs. And we were all kind of scratching our head going, what's going on here? And we didn't, at the time we didn't know. Now we do. We can step back and look at history. So we're seeing heroin now, like I said, quadruple, literally. It's everywhere. And we're all trying to figure out what the heck is going on. From the cartel perspective, again, they literally can't produce this stuff fast enough. So they're cutting it more and more and more, and they need a good cut. And that's where fentanyl is introduced. Fentanyl is an opioid. It's more powerful than heroin. And they thought, this is great. It's cheap, it's potent, it's highly addictive. Let's cut our heroin supply with this stuff and just push it out. And by about, I would say 2012, 2013, we pretty much saw fentanyl in our entire heroin supply in the United States. It just took over. It really did. And then when you look at the overdose deaths, again, I call them drug poisonings, a horizontal line, and I'm not minimizing lives, but it was a relatively low number, 3,000 people a year. And then it spikes up in the late 1990s because of legal opioids. And then it spikes up again to where it is now. In 2023, we lost 107,000 Americans to drugs in this country. We know the number is going to be a little lower in 2024, even though it's not official yet. But if you dive deeper into those numbers, it's fentanyl. And early on, when that chart goes from horizontal to vertical, we had no idea why. And now we do. It was fentanyl. So if I'm using heroin, a deadly dose of heroin is about 30 milligrams-ish. A deadly dose of fentanyl, 2 milligrams. That's a significant difference. So a lot of those folks that were dying, in fact, I would say 100% of those folks that were dying, they had no idea they were getting fentanyl. The cartels and the drug traffickers were putting this very deadly cut into our heroin supply, and people were dying in masses overnight. And that's, I can go on and on and on, and how it just takes over from there. But
so Purdue and these multinational companies, these pharmaceuticals, they lobbied Congress. They got things changed. The doctors now could ask questions about pain. If you said you're in pain, I'm going to give you opioids. And that kicked off this crisis.
I absolutely believe that. There's a lot of history. In fact, there's been a lot of folks who have sunshine laws, FOIA. There's been a lot of folks looking at the inner communication, the emails and stuff. And I saw one where there was talk within Purdue that originally OxyContin was going to be for stage 4 cancer patients, And then someone says that's too small of a pool. We need to increase it. And they weren't alone, but they were by far the worst actors, and they benefited the most from it.
Brian, is fentanyl like 50 times more potent than heroin? Would you sort of?
Yeah, it absolutely. Yes, okay. It's significantly more. And that's. Just again, 30 milligrams of heroin is what we consider a lethal dose, which is quite a bit of heroin. 2 milligrams of fentanyl. So you think 2 milligrams is a couple granules of salt or sand. Think of the tip of a pen, right? It's literally that small.
It's interesting that you said a lot of the deaths, they were unsuspecting. They didn't realize there was fentanyl in their cocaine or their Percocet or their Xanax or whatever they were buying. These kids were crushing it, snorting it, or taking the pill, and now they're dead.
Yeah, in fact, I'd still say that, I think nowadays people know that there's a chance the fentanyl is getting into the drug supply, but most still aren't looking. There's a lot of folks that are looking for fentanyl, but if you're someone who uses Percocets, or counterfeit Percocets, or someone who uses cocaine or methamphetamine, the last thing you're thinking is fentanyl. And that's exactly what happened. One of the statistics I always like to talk about, DEA has a program called the National Forensic Laboratory Information System, NFLIS-drug. And they work with about 98, 99% of all the drug labs in the United States. So I don't care if you're with Chicago PD or if you're with HSI, FBI, whoever you work with, your lab is probably talking to this system. And this is how we look for drug trends and things like that. To give you the significance of fentanyl and the impact it's had, in 2014, we seized about 5,500 exhibits in the United States, all the United States in law enforcement, containing fentanyl. 5,500 instances of fentanyl in 2014. By 2019, we were over 100,000. That's more than a 1,700% increase in 5 years. By 2020, it was over 200,000. So think about this. In 2014, we had 5,500 instances of fentanyl being seized by law enforcement. By 2020, we were over 200,000. That's more than a 3,500% increase in 6 years. Number one drug seized in the United States is methamphetamine. It's been meth for a long time. Number two, historically speaking, cocaine. Guess what number two is now? It's fentanyl. It literally, and again, go back to 2014 when it was barely scratched the surface. And now it's the second most seized drug in the US. And if you look at the overall map of the US, individual states, fentanyl, I think it's 16 states. It's now the number one seized drug in 16 states. It's incredible.
Do you have an idea of how much fentanyl is in other drugs?
So the NFLIS data does show us what's co-reported. In 2023, heroin, for instance, we know now that if you can find heroin, about 72% of all heroin now has fentanyl in it. And I would argue that's probably higher now. That data is a little bit old. The last data we have is about 40% of cocaine now has fentanyl in it. And about 17% of all methamphetamine now has fentanyl in it. And then as far as our counterfeit pill supply, oh my goodness, not only fentanyl, but methamphetamine and just other poisons out there. But we now know that about 50%, 5 out of every 10 pills that are seized with fentanyl in it, have it. Not only do they have fentanyl in it, they have at least 2 milligrams of fentanyl in it, which is, again, considered a lethal dose.
Mm-hmm. I'm glad you mentioned these counterfeit pills, because this is a strategy the cartel's using, is to create different color pills and different color stamps. They're now branding their pills. They're fighting for brand loyalty. Yeah. What is the strategy behind counterfeiting pills? Pretending that it's the exact same size and color as a Xanax, but really it's fentanyl.
They want to take that market first. I mean, they will self-brand some of the pills, but that's a different customer almost. If I'm someone who's looking for oxycodone, I actually probably want a real oxycodone. I don't have the ability, or I don't want to go to a physician, or maybe the physician says no to me. So I go to the streets and I pick this up. So they're trying to take that market. And not only are they trying to take it, they'll sell it for quite a bit less. So where, depending on my insurance here in the US, maybe I'm paying $100 for 30 days of pills, where on the street I could get these for, depending on where I am and the quantity I buy, maybe, $5 to $10 a pill. And that's happening quite a bit. And by the way, the pills don't have to be opioids. Absolutely not. I mean, if there is a pill, there's probably a counterfeit. And if there's a counterfeit, more than likely it's going to have fentanyl or meth or, again, some other type of poison in it. And we're seeing that across the board. The big three that law enforcement are seizing are oxycodone, Adderall, and Xanax bars. Those are by far the most. And Oxy is, and for the longest time, they were blue. Circle pills, they were blue with an M on one side, and then the other side has a 30 on it. So now we see them in multiple colors. So look for red, green, yellow. Sometimes on the streets they'll call them Skittles or rainbow colors.
Here in Chicago they call it M-Box 30, depending on the generation.
Yep. Yeah, I've seen blueberries, M30s, tons of terminology, the slang, and that's that's when I talk to law enforcement, I always tell them, talk to the folks you're arresting, talk to the folks that you're in contact with, figure out what the terminology is, stay ahead of the times on how the bad guys and how the drug users are using it.
Brian, could we talk about the impact that this has had on the United States in terms of, I think I read that it's now the leading cause of death between, I think, 18 and 45-year-old Americans.
Yeah, it's having a devastating impact. Like I said, a couple years ago, we lost 107,000 Americans to drugs. And these aren't just numbers. I use a lot of statistics, but these are people, right? These are sons, daughters, family members, neighbors.
It's a lot of military-age males as well.
Yeah, absolutely, right? I mean, that's another reason why China is happy about this, right? And it's incredible the impact it's had. And when you dive deep into the numbers, it's fentanyl. About 75 to 80% of all drug deaths are now fentanyl. So every time I get a phone call, hey, we just had a 17-year-old, I'm like, probably fentanyl. And 75% of the time, I'm right. It's incredible the impact it's had. In 30 years in law enforcement, I've never seen a drug this impactful. Never. And it's not even the most dangerous drug out there. There's a lot more dangerous synthetics out there. But I've never seen a drug have this type of profound impact. Again, 2014, it barely scratched the surface. I mean, it was obviously having an impact. And now it's just taken over, where it's everywhere. And the impact it's having in the U.S., number of people dying, the number of people that are suffering from substance use disorder, addiction has increased. It's really sad.
Are we sober to the fact that this is devastating our country right now? Do you think Americans realize what has happened over the past 10 years? And if we continue on this trajectory, what the next 10 years will look like?
No, I don't. The stigma of drug use is so strong, it hurts our ability to really effectively figure out solutions. We typically look at it and say they made their own choice. This was their bed. Let them sleep in it. We use terminology like junkie, addict. We treat these people like outcasts, like they're some type of moral failure. And because of that, two things are happening. And one is a lot of folks don't get the treatment that they need because of the shame, because of the embarrassment, because of the way that they're viewed within society. And the other thing we do is we don't effectively treat we don't look at demand. I mean, it impacts how we respond to it. We think, we can just go ahead and just arrest these folks, just put more money behind, DEA or Chicago PD or whoever. And I'm not against that. I think that's part of a holistic approach, to go after the cartels, go after China and the regulation of these chemicals, go after all these different folks. But if we don't look at the demand, if we don't figure out a way we can reduce demand and help people that are struggling from this, we're never, ever, ever going to wrap our hands around this. We're just not. It goes back to simple economics, supply and demand. We can put the demand or the supply side in jail, but there's going to be other folks that are willing to step up and take over. And the stigma kills us. It really does.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that the penalty should be harsher? I think I read here in the States, if you're caught in possession, with some amount, less than 400 grams or something like that, it's just maybe 0 to 5 years in prison and maybe some fines. And depends on, of course, if it's your first offense or not. And I just contrast that to China, where you go to prison for a long time for possession of fentanyl. And if you distribute fentanyl or the intent to sell fentanyl, you're executed there. They understand how dangerous this is, and I think we don't.
I absolutely agree. In fact, we've seen a shift in our very progressive way that we prosecute and handle these investigations in the United States, and I think that hurts us. It's tough. It really is. I think there ought to be some serious consequences for folks who are trafficking drugs, specifically fentanyl. And if there are drug-induced homicides, which we know is, I think 33 states as of today have those laws in place. I'd like to see all the states come out and say, hey, we need to those are difficult cases to do, but I think they're worthy cases to do, because now you're not only putting a drug dealer in jail, you're putting someone who was responsible for someone else's death because of their reckless and careless behavior. I would love to see our country do more and more on that, and I think that would ultimately help. But every jurisdiction is a little different. I mean, even here in Chicago, I'm sure. I know I've worked with a lot of law enforcement officers around the suburbs who they're thankful they're in the suburbs because they can get prosecution when they know they come to Cook County. And I'm sure there's some great prosecutors in Cook County. I don't want to have any hate mail come in, but I can tell you from my experience that a lot of the other folks are happy they're not in the Cook County area. And that's just one silly example, but the point is it really depends on which jurisdiction you're in too, right? I mean, how successful you are in prosecuting these cases and how accountable people are going to be. But I absolutely believe there needs to be some harsher penalty. I don't think we need to necessarily kill them, but folks that are trafficking, I think we need to hold them accountable for sure.
What do you think we should be doing differently to the cartels or with the cartels? How do we stop the flow of drugs in this country if possible?
Well, number one, I'm going to go back to we got to reduce our demand. Again, I don't know if El Chapo said it, but the rumor is that when he got arrested, he said, "I will never stop selling drugs until the United States stops buying them." And whether he said it or not, I think that's ultimately what we have to do. We have to figure out a way to reduce demand. That's one of the reasons why I do a lot of what I do. I talk to young people. I try to give them some education. Some information is power, right? And if only even one kid in that class hears me speak and says, "Okay, I'm going to not use the drug," well, that's a win. I'd love all the kids in the class to have that feeling, but we gotta. And that's just one little example. We got to reduce the demand, though. We got to reduce the demand. From the law enforcement perspective, from the political perspective, really, I'd start, and we're seeing quite a bit of that now over the last year with President Trump and President Sheinbaum in Mexico. I mean, we've got to put pressure on them. I know they're a sovereign nation, but we need them to take this serious. And from my perspective, and I'm no longer active DEA, I'm retired, so I can give you that. We didn't have that over the last 6 years with their last president, AMLO. He had a hugs, not bullets policy. In fact, that's what they call it, hugs, not bullets. And our ability to be effective in Mexico was diminished quite a bit. He was funneling a lot of information that we were sharing through one channel. And as opposed to us being able to go to different vetted units. And not that we didn't have success doing that, but really was difficult. And there was a lot of concern that when Sheinbaum took the presidency down there that we would see more of the same. But I don't think they were expecting President Trump. He's been a lot more aggressive with them. And politics aside, I think that's what we have to do. We have to figure out a way to get them at the table negotiating and figure out a way that, I don't know if we leverage trades, the tariffs, whatever it is, but get them to cooperate in a way that helps us reduce the flow of drugs into the United States. Mm-hmm. But we need to support our law enforcement, our efforts to stop these drugs. Again, a holistic approach, but I would 100% start with reducing the demand.
Do you think that we'll get involved in some type of kinetic war with the Mexican cartels?
No, I think we'd provide more resources like we're already doing. We'll continue to leverage our technology and our resources overall, our knowledge, our experience, to better help them, to aid them and make them more effective. And because that's what they need. We give them information on labs, things like that, and go back to the last administration. I read an article, I forget which news agency it was, but 95% of the intel that we were providing on fentanyl labs, when they actually rated them, if they actually did, they were inactive. 95%. Now, I know sometimes intel can get stale and can get old, but that just doesn't make sense. 95%, it's just ridiculous. So we have the ability now to give them intel, to give them resources, and as long as they have an ear, as long as they're willing to take it, which I think they have right now because of the leverage that we have on them, mm-hmm. with the border and trade, commerce, things like that. That's going to help us be more effective and help them be more effective.
Brian, is that corruption? Like, why would 95% be inactive? Is it because by the time they were notified, they moved that mobile lab or shut it down? Yeah, so it's corruption.
Corruption, yeah. And I hate to say that, but it's the truth. It's corruption. It's very, a lot of corruption down there. And it's sad because Mexico is, well, it's a beautiful country, and there's a lot of amazing people down who really want to clean up their country. Mm-hmm. But the corruption is really money is a corrupting thing, and it really has.
I think it's hard for Americans to understand how vast and massive the cartel corruption is in the Mexican government. If both cartels, if all the cartels combined are doing like 40, 50 billion in drug trade, that's a lot of money for a country the size of Mexico, and it can create a lot of influence. It could be representative, maybe 25% of your GDP could have some affiliation, some connection to cartel trade.
Absolutely, and we've seen that historically, not only in Mexico, but in other countries. Look at Pablo Escobar. I mean, what was he trying to do? He was trying to buy politicians, right? And you can't say that doesn't happen, because it does happen. It's historically happened. It continues to happen. And if you're someone who's making billions of dollars, what are you going to do with that? You're gonna. We see that even in the legal, right? If you're a successful company and Congress is looking at trying to regulate you, what are you going to do with some of that cash? You're gonna hire lobbyists. You're gonna be knocking on those senators and congressmen's office, and you're going to say, hey, calm down on these regulations, or you're going to, and that's the reality of what happens. It's not,
Yeah. I've spent some time with Steve Murphy, one of your former colleagues, the DEA. And of course, he helped take down Pablo Escobar. Mm-hmm. And I was thinking when you were talking about the new generation cartel and how violent they are, I read that they shot down a helicopter. They remind me a lot of Pablo's cartel, 20, 30 years ago, just in how brash they are, taking on a government, firing missiles at aircraft. Pablo, one of the things that led to his downfall, of course, is they took down that commercial airliner. Yeah. And that really energized the country, to sort of fight back.
Yeah, it pushed the feelings, right? It's hard to get behind someone who's giving you turkeys for Thanksgiving when they just took down an airliner, and the cartels in Mexico, I'd even make the argument that they're more brash, they're more violent. They're more organized in their efforts to combat law enforcement and the folks that are trying to end them, right? So incredible.
Can you give us a sense of the amount of death and destruction that's occurred?
Wow. In Mexico?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Well, I know during the last administration, 2018 to 2024, during AMLO, it was the deadliest time in Mexico's history. More people died in those 6 years during his presidency than any other time in Mexico's history. I couldn't give you the exact numbers. I'd have to research that.
And the reason behind that is just sort of soft politics with the explosion of fentanyl all occurring at the same time.
Oh, at the same time, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and the number of people dying, I mean, it's thousands and thousands of thousands. I mean, mass graves do they find all the time, right? And politicians who don't play, there was just one couple days ago, his car blew up, right? A governor, or not the governor, a mayor, I forget which area of Mexico it was now, but it happens quite a bit, and it's scary. It's much different than in the U.S., Here we just get on the news and we badmouth each other, but there they
hang you
use
from
guns.
bridges.
They hang them from bridges. They absolutely narco messages, all banners, all the time. Yeah.
Brian, how many cartel operators do you think are in this country today?
Oh my goodness. Well, we know the primary two are still the Sinaloa and the CJNG. But there are a lot, and they'll work with criminal organizations in the U.S. MS-13, Mexican Mafia, the Bloods, Crips. I mean, they're very effective in doing that. So, historically in the U.S., we'd always call it kind of a hub and spoke. So they would come to a hub, for instance, Chicago, and then they would spoke off into the different areas. But now that we're seeing them work in a lot more rural areas. Tons of rural activity with cartels and gangs. One reason we believe that is happening is because over the last 10, 20 years, a lot of these cartel members have been incarcerated with our local gangbangers. And what do they do when they're in jail? They talk about what they're going to do when they get out of jail and how they're going to continue their criminal enterprise. So if I'm a local gang member and I was just incarcerated with a cartel member and I've befriended him.
Yeah, you just made a plug.
Absolutely, I have a plug, right? So when I get out, he's going to be my source, right? He's going to be my plug, and that's exactly what's happening in a lot of the United States, especially a lot of, like I said, a lot of rural areas where we would typically look at Chicago. Now we can go into little towns of 15, 20,000 people, and you can find cartel activity. Those are the main two that are in the U.S. They don't just. I think that's what a lot of things we don't understand as well. People think they get to the border and they push the drugs over and they just wait for the money. No.
Yeah.
They have to control the operations on the United States side as well.
I meant sort of like how many members, humans,
Oh,
do you think are
goodness.
in this country? 20,000?
That's hard to say.
The reason I ask is because a lot of people think, why don't we just fly some drones down there and drop some predator strikes? And the reason we don't is because there's 20,000 soldiers already in this country. I think people don't realize that, the level of violence that can occur, if that were to happen.
Absolutely. And people don't think people are dying in the U.S. They are. There's a lot of cartel activity in the U.S. where people are dying. I saw it in South Texas quite a bit. They don't just operate on the south side of the border. It's more out in the open there, and we certainly see about it more on the news there. But it happens in the United States quite a bit as well. And but yeah, I mean, they could certainly turn up the heat a little bit in the U.S. Depending on our response in Mexico. A number, I don't know, that's tough to put a number on them.
One of my
it's a lot.
friends, Griff, who's retired, he did some undercover DEA work. He had mentioned one of the challenges is that the cartel will use illegals. And, a capo will come and take them away. And because they're illegals, people die. We don't hear about it. Yeah. We don't know they went missing. Do you think that is a big part of why that Americans don't realize how much violence is happening on the north side of the border?
I think that, and the fact that we've politicized a lot of this. And when we politicize things, especially in this day and age, we take sides and we put blinders on and we fail to see what's happening. I have to be careful when I speak about politics in my training because I'm not trying to isolate it. I don't want anybody to walk out because I've said something good about Trump. I'll say something bad about him as well. I try to look at things from a public safety perspective. And whether it's good or bad, I'm just going to give you the truth, right? Or at least from my perspective. But I think people are just unwilling to see those things because we just put the blinders on. And it's easier to accept that if you like a person, everything he says and does is gold. And if you don't like him, look at the border, for instance. We talked about the border. 2017, President Trump said, we're going to build a border wall. Half the country immediately said, bad idea. What people don't realize is that wasn't an original. What he said was, we've been secure in our border since for 100 years, since 1924. We've been secure in our border. 100 years. But the moment those syllables left his mouth, half the country's like, bad idea. And we know he's a very divisive person. He could come out today and say, I think orange ties are the best, and half the country would be outside burning their orange ties, right? I mean, that's just the reality of it. And that's the problem I think we have is Derek Maltz, who was a DEA legend, and he ran the DEA for the last couple months until Terry Kroll just came in. He always says it's not a red issue or a blue issue, it's a red, white, and blue issue. And I 100% concur, and I use that statement quite a bit. Unfortunately, this problem it needs a holistic approach, but we put our blinders on and we just don't tackle it from different angles or understand what's happening from different angles because we've politicized it. And I think that's a disservice to all of us.
I think you're right, that it's been politicized. I think, depending on what news channel you watch or where you get your news from, we don't cover some of the cartel activity that's happening in the north because it does involve illegals, and people just don't want to put it on the news and talk about it for whatever reason.
Unfortunate, and we know a lot of them. I wouldn't say the majority of them or all of them, But we do know that some of them are obviously involved in criminal behavior. And of course, my perspective is from drugs, but I mean, you can look at the ones that are, raping, murdering, driving drunk, killing people. I mean, that's, how we respond to that is, maybe a political discussion as well. But the fact of the matter is well, yeah.
Brian, switching from Mexico to China, what was the DEA's relationship like with China? Were they cooperative? Were they helpful? Do you think? I'm really curious to understand why you think it's a strategic decision by the Chinese to allow the flow of precursors to the cartels.
Well, I mean, there's always this battle between the United States and China, right? I mean, ultimately they're not an ally, right? I think if the U.S. ended tomorrow, I don't think China is going to be crying about it, right? And so you look at all the things they've done over the last, several decades to hurt the United States, right? And kind of this warfare without people on the ground. And I think drugs are another avenue for that. I mean, what better way to, one, profit, and number two, kill Americans than saturate this country with poison,
So it's just another form of asymmetric warfare along with IP theft.
Yes.
And TikTok and just every little thing you can do to sort of hurt
absolutely
American military age males. Take
our products, reverse engineer them, sell them for cheaper, steal our technology, kill our, like I said, especially our young military age folks. If you're an enemy, why wouldn't you do those things, right? Because not only are you having a negative impact on the U.S., you're making money from it. You're profiting from it. I mean, look at the Taliban in Afghanistan. I mean, they're for the longest time, they were a huge heroin and poppy production was a huge way for them to make money. And so it's great because they can fund their activity and they can hurt Americans because then ultimately a lot of that heroin is going to ultimately go back into the United States. So, I mean, it's the same thing with China is how can we hurt them and also profit from this devastation?
Mm-hmm. I had heard that the cooperation really broke down after Pelosi visited the Taiwanese president. Did you find that to be the case?
No, I didn't really, but frankly, I didn't really dive too much into that. We've had a lot of politicians go over there. I don't know if they hurt or help. I think they get a lot of lip service, I know in 2019 when the Chinese government changed the way that fentanyl was regulated, like I said, prior to 2019, they could send the product. And after 2019, it was chemicals only. That was, in my opinion, that was lip service given to President Trump during the G8 summit. He said, hey, we need to figure out the fentanyl problem. And they were like, yeah, absolutely, we'll outlaw it. And then he turned around and winked at his companies and said, just send them the chemicals, let them make it themselves, right? And so that's the problem with a lot of the politicians is we just get a lot of lip service. There's so much more that, well above my pay grade and knowledge level, it needs to be done with China to hold them accountable and stop the flow of these chemicals. But then, of course, Mexico gets involved and says, well, maybe these chemicals are used for other things, right? And we don't regulate them like you do in the U.S. So you stay out of our conversation, right? I mean, it's a lot of geopolitical headaches there.
Can we move to law enforcement tactics and strategies? What do you think some solutions might be? You mentioned AI being used at the border to detect compartments. What are some other tactics or strategies that you might be excited about?
One is I'd like to see an increase in drug-induced homicides. When we know that folks are selling drugs that are causing the death of other folks, the fentanyl traffickers, I'd like to see an increase in that. So anything that can help those officers, any resources. One of the big things we do in those types of investigations is phone work. We have to exploit the phone. All people communicate one faction or another. And we know a lot of drug traffickers will use telephones, right? So. Or apps within the phones. We need technology to be able to dive into these things and unlock these phones, look at the text messages, look at the different apps they're using, and hopefully help us paint a picture of what happened, right? So help us achieve some type of successful prosecution, whether it's the drug-induced homicide or whether it's just simple, trafficking, So I'd like to see more technology there. I think that would help, certainly.
I spent a lot of time in that area.
Yeah.
There's a good company called Celebrate.
Yeah. Very familiar with it. In fact,
Yeah, tell me.
No, I was going to say when they first came out, they were certifying officers, and I was probably like within the first 20 classes they ever did.
Oh, yeah.
Now I think you have to know math and algorithms. It's a little bit more. I don't want to say complicated because they're a great company, but yeah.
Yeah, we connect to Celebrate, and we process cell phone data.
Oh, awesome!
And that's really important data because that's all the jargon. Those are the weights, the buying rituals. What are the corner boys talking about?
Yeah.
All of that is very local. That's one of the problems with narcotics is it's super local. Like in Chicago, a certain generation will refer to the weights, points as a point of a gram, or whatever the prices are, and that'll be very different than maybe just a couple miles down the road. Call it something completely different, fen or China white or whatever, and it's very different in Chicago than in Kansas City. I'm sure they call these drugs something totally different. So the way to get up on this jargon quickly and to teach young agents and just to open up investigative techniques is to get that cell phone data and get that uploaded into an AI system like TruEnough as quickly as possible, so you can get a sense of what's happening in the neighborhood.
I 100% agree. I think that's great. I think, and then you put more data into it, right? And it can make sense of it, and it can help these officers and agents quickly, again, paint a picture of what they're seeing and how they need to proceed. And I think that's a win-win for law enforcement. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. And I think AI will help officers manage CIs as well. I think if you're, especially a young agent, you might not know what the language is. You might have been, you're not from the streets. You might be, from some other area. And there's a funny story I always think about that a friend told me. They were working a UC case, and his partner texts something like, I don't know, B&E or something like only a law or something. No, only a police officer would say.
Yeah.
And the person responded back like, okay, detective, we won't be meeting this afternoon. So I think AI is going to help manage CIs. A lot of folks, as you know, that have CIs, they'll have 4 or 5 phones out at their dinner table, and those aren't good conversations. Those are with prostitutes and corner boys and all and I think AI will help check in and manage and score responses and really understand like who is a valuable CI and who's not, and allow you to scale your CI work as well.
I agree, and I'm looking forward to seeing how that technology continues to improve and grow, especially, like you said, multiple phones, right? It's one thing to analyze one phone. Now take 4 or 5 phones or maybe 100 phones, right? And have a program that can just look at that and find the common denominator, or the common frequency, or whatever, and it's fascinating, and I'm excited. I hope we continue to see growth there, and that'll certainly help.
And not just text analysis. I'm seeing like a lot of these drug dealers will use emojis to try to communicate.
Emojis. That's another thing. In fact, I have a slide in my PowerPoint. I talk about fentanyl with emojis in it, and I tell people, hey, look, it's not just the terminology. Sometimes it's the actual emojis. Mm-hmm. And I had one up one time, and I had a mom. It was a public presentation I was doing, and I had a mom in the class, and she made this noise, kind of like a gasp.
She recognized it.
She recognized something, and during the break, she came up to me and she said that her son was struggling from Adderall use. And she was looking at his cell phone every single day to make sure he wasn't talking about drugs, hadn't seen anything, but she was noticing more emojis. And when she saw the slide I had up, and it was a PDF of a DEA emoji chart that DEA put out, public bulletin type thing, and she noticed one that she had seen on her son's phone, and she says, "Oh my goodness!" And it said Adderall on there. And she said, I thought something was weird. He was talking about going to the library and study aids, and this is all terminology for Adderall. And she goes, now I know. And she goes, I almost want to leave right now and go back home because she was so upset, But you struck a nerve there, or something, an experience there that I dealt with. But 100%. And every part of the country is a little different, right? I mean, you listen to, we used to do a lot of DEA still does a lot of Title III investigations, wiretaps where we're listening to telephones, and you hear all the codes, right? They don't want to say, please send me the cocaine. It's always, hey, you got some paint, you got some work, and we got to stay on top of that. And that's back to technology. I think technology is going to certainly help that, where it's going to say, okay, even if we don't know what this word is, it doesn't make sense here. Yeah. We're going to flag that, and we need you to figure out, what's going on.
I once asked Steve Murphy what Pablo called cocaine on the phone. He said cattle.
Cattle? Well, I did not know that. Interesting.
Yeah, 50 head cattle.
Even the head of the Pablo Escobar is even using terminology or slang, right? I mean, it's incredible, and it changes, like you said, and it can go from a mile later or a mile into the suburbs. You might be calling it something different,
Yeah. Another one of these technology changes I've seen happen are these apps, like the Telegrams or the WhatsApps, all these encrypted channels. They enable and facilitate dead drops, where it's really difficult for you guys to get somebody, unless they're like on a re-up or something, because everything is just dead dropped. Yeah. It's instant notification. Hey, your dope's over there. The cash is there. I don't know how you're gonna.
It's tough.
I don't know how you win that fight.
It's tough because encryption is the big thing, right? Privacy, and this is what cracks me up and this also really kind of pisses me off a little bit is companies like Meta will talk about privacy, and Apple does this all the time, the need for privacy. We give everything. If you have an iPhone or an Android in your pocket, you give everything up to these folks, everything. I mean, look at Google. Google doesn't sell a product; they sell information. And I'm not against Apple or Android or Google, but if the government says, hey, we want access to this information, it's, Big Brother, stop it. But yet we voluntarily give this up every single day to the phones in our pocket. Yeah. And we have no problem with it. And then not only that, they have to sell that data to the government, to law enforcement. And it's so backwards the way people think on that. But it's frustrating. These apps are, and the traffickers know this, right? They know that they can get on these encrypted apps, and they can, because communication's everything. We can't always be in front of each other, right? So we might have to use a phone at some point or an app at some point. And they want to have secure communications, especially when they're conducting criminal activity, right?
Yeah, they love their FaceTime. They love iCloud. Right. I was just having a conversation with one of the lead ICAC commanders. She's retired, but she's world class, and she's hunted child sex predators. Wow. And one of the biggest challenges is that Apple iCloud, they don't cooperate with law enforcement. They could easily scan and find the CSAM, all the child abuse material, but they don't. They don't want to cooperate because they view any type of opening up that encryption to law enforcement is a slippery slope, and they're going to lose their buyers.
Yeah, and again, that's frustrating me because it's a $1 billion business for them to exploit this information, and they all work with each other. Yeah. I mean, an example. I mean, we could go down to, I don't know, Home Depot, and we could walk down aisle 20, and we could turn and look at whatever. Let's say we're looking at drills, and then we leave the store 10 minutes later, right? And so what's happening? Your phone's talking to your credit card, it's talking to the store cash register, and it's figuring out that you walked down aisle 20, you turned, you looked at drills, and you left without buying one. So then what are they going to do? They're going to give you drill ads on Facebook or Instagram, and this is targeted advertising. Companies been doing this for many, many, many years, but now they use social media to really be effective doing that, and no one has a problem with that. But the moment we go to one of those companies and say, "Hey, we have a child predator or a sexual predator who just molested 100 children at this orphanage." This is a crazy example I'm giving you, but it happens. And we're going to need his data. Oh, no, that's a privacy thing. But yet you just sold that data to all the companies out there who are willing to make money off it, and we have no problem. But when we ask for a legitimate criminal investigation, even with a warrant, all of a sudden, that's a slippery slope. We don't want to go down there. And that just infuriates me that these companies do that.
What are some other technologies or techniques? I'm wondering, do you view, I view sort of jail calls as like ground zero, as for like criminal activity. And I'm wondering if you guys are in that space, paying attention to that space, thinking about how technology can help you guys by understanding what is being said on the wall.
Absolutely. If you are in law enforcement and you're not looking at jail phone calls, you are missing out. That's step one, is you got to get access to these jail phone calls. And then if we can use technology to summarize these calls, look for the terminology, look for the code, make sense of what they're actually talking about. Because sometimes, quite frankly, you have someone who's in jail for a while, you might have hours and hours and hours. That takes time. Who has time to sit there and listen to? I've done it before. It takes a long time to listen to hours and hours. So if you can have technology that can help you, with that process and make sense of that process, that's a win-win.
Yeah, I've done a lot of work in that space.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I always tell officers, if at a minimum, find merge calls.
Yeah.
Find male 1 calling female 1. She'll merge female 2. She'll merge male 2. Yeah. Find merge calls. That's not difficult to do. And you want to pay attention to those, because in my opinion, I think less than 1% of these calls are ever reviewed by anybody. I think they know that. I think the guards tell them that.
Yeah.
I think the call volume has exploded. Yeah. I think since COVID, I think when people couldn't go in and see their loved ones, they made a lot of calls for free, and I don't think it's reverted back. And so they're just so comfortable on the walls that they talk. As you know, they trade pins, and so it's very difficult to find out who exactly is that on the wall talking. But I think it's one of the largest sources of intelligence for law enforcement agencies.
I agree. And you think of all the crimes that are being solved because they get on the phone and they basically confess to a loved one or to a co-conspirator. And like I said, even when they share pins, to have technology that can say, this is not the right voice. This sounds like Joe Schmo or whoever. I mean, just to be able to make sense of all this will make you more effective. And that makes our community safer, and that's what we should be doing. Yeah.
I have another tip for any law enforcement listening. Another tip that took us a while to learn is respectfulness, that you want to sort by that. If somebody's being very respectful, especially talking to a female, that female's in the business, and respectfulness is in the business. A lot of those calls, as you know, are with family and friends and people not involved in the business. And there's just a lot of disrespect, that language that can occur. Yeah. But anytime we would find respectfulness, then we would key in on that and understand that this might be somebody in the business.
No, it's interesting. I was actually here in Chicago for the gang conference, right? And I had an individual in my class, and we were talking during one of the breaks, and he was talking about a car stop he made with quite a bit of fentanyl in it. And literally what you just said there. So they were in a very bad area, an area known for when people get pulled over, it's, why'd you pull me over, and F you, and blah, blah, blah. And he gets to this car and the windows roll down. How you doing, officer? And it was over the top, just very respectful, very kind. Is that where you're going with respectfulness,
Yes, sort of. On the calls, these cartels are squared away. They're very militant, and other people that are in the business, they're very respectful to. Whereas they have a lot of people in their life that they'll be disrespectful to, their 100%. Girlfriends or somebody that's not in the business. So it was just another really key, fast way to key into these calls was vehicle driving instructions or vehicle operating instructions. Yeah. So, basically describing turn the air conditioning here. Oh, interesting. Turn this knob here.
Compartments and things.
Opening up compartments. Yep. Why are you in jail talking about vehicle operating instructions?
Exactly.
So there's a lot of really low-lying things that I think law enforcement can do to key in on these conversations. You don't have to listen to, hundreds of hours of nonsense.
What better way?
10 seconds.
Yeah. I agree. I absolutely agree. What better way to get the intel, sometimes actionable intel, and learn about the organization or the defendant than listen to, and there's no complicated search warrants and affidavits. I mean, when they make those phone calls,
there's no right to privacy.
Absolutely, it's yours to get. And why are we not getting it? And then why are we not utilizing technology to make sense of it? It's a no-brainer. It really is.
Is there any other technology, tactic, strategy that you see emerging that officers who might be watching this show should be thinking about?
I think we're going to see more with the body cams and the drones and facial rec. And trying to really tie people and phones together and give law enforcement a better picture and a better understanding
Like a network analysis of who did they call, and is that person in the business, and if so, who does that person call?
Absolutely, and then tying in, maybe you've gone by a residence, maybe you're doing surveillance at a residence, and you have a tag, and it registers to a name, and then, because the system is networking and speaking to each other, maybe it looks at that tag and says, well, that's identified with this phone number or this voice that's in jail. And it's putting these networks of people together. And that's one of the things that we do when we exploit telephones is we're trying to figure out who are the co-conspirators, who are they working with. It's not, I probably didn't manufacture the drugs and smuggle them into the US and sell them all one person. There was probably a chain of folks involved. And what better way to identify those different co-conspirators than use technology who can look at all these different things and put them all together. It's what businesses are doing, right? They're trying to figure out our buying habits, our vacation habits, our what we're going to drive, what we're going to eat. We should be doing the same thing, taking all this information, this data, use AI or whatever growing technology we have, make sense of it, and again, help us paint a picture and be more effective. And when we can do that, we put more bad people in jail, hold them accountable, and we make our communities safer.
Yeah, the agency puts together what's called patterns of life. And, you have outliers, people that maybe don't have a night job, but have unusual patterns of life where they sleep or where they go is consistent with somebody that's involved in, drug trade. So I agree that the cell phones are the key to understanding. I mean, they know everything about us. They know every conversation you have. So getting access to that cell phone, getting that data, creating patterns of life, finding the associates, who else is in the business. Companies like Celebrate and others are very good at what they do.
Absolutely, and I'm happy that they exist. I'm happy your company exists because they're making the job easier and making us more effective. And I'll say it again, that ultimately makes our community safer, and that's why we should be doing this.
Brian, will you tell us more about your foundation and the work that you do there?
So Only 2MG is a 501c3 nonprofit recognized by the IRS, like I said, as a 501c3. I founded it in early 2024. The entire board of directors is retired DEA. We just brought on a new executive director a couple months ago. She was doing all of our PR work, and now she's our executive director, which is great. Our goal originally was to bring awareness to illicit fentanyl. We have since expanded it to all public safety threats. Fentanyl being probably 95% of what we do right now, but we're certainly asked to address other emerging threats, especially like with schools. They always want to know about marijuana, they want to know about vaping, things that they're encountering quite a bit. But we want to talk to as many people as we can. I started this in late 2022. I'm a law enforcement training coordinator for the Mid-States Organized Crime Information Center, and I developed curriculum. They said, can you develop drug curriculum? That's kind of your background. I'm like, absolutely. So I was building different drug classes, informants, just basic narcotics investigations, surveillance, and I built a 2-hour class on opioids based on my knowledge and experience with opioids, specifically fentanyl. And it went over really well. That was in October of 2022. And I did another one in November, I did another one in December, I made some changes to it, and it ultimately went to 2.5 hours, then it went to 3 hours, and now it's a 4-hour program. And I've actually even conducted it in 8 hours. I've had some law enforcement agencies who wanted a full day of just opioid training. And in 2023, I ended up doing it, 35, 40 times across the United States. And then in 2024, early, we made it a nonprofit. And then I conducted it 54 times. And then earlier this year, I conducted Presentation 100, which was, I'm very proud about it. It was a huge milestone to do a presentation 100 times and train not only law enforcement, but community leaders, people in the health sector, education, people in the treatment and recovery community. Parents is who I really want to reach, but parents are tough. They are so tough to get into this training.
Why is that?
Unfortunately, most parents don't, I hate to use the word care because I don't want to be cruel. That's not my intention.
It's not a priority.
It's not a priority until it becomes a priority. It's not a priority until my son and daughter is suffering from this stuff, or unfortunately maybe passes away from this, is killed by this stuff. And then there's a nonprofit. And I'm happy that they found an avenue for their pain and they want to help other people. I think that's a beautiful thing. But I'm trying to encourage people to be proactive and not reactive. And again, I'm not criticizing the folks out there. I've met a lot of these families. A lot of them have really successful nonprofits now. And I think they're doing wonderful work. I really do. But my goal is to be proactive. I didn't lose a son or daughter or a family member to. Now I have a lot of friends now who have suffered this pain, but I don't have that personally. I want to be a positive change in this world and show people that you can be knowledgeable and you can give a damn and maybe prevent this from happening in your lives. And that was really my purpose of starting this nonprofit. It's important to me. Law enforcement was my initial and probably still my biggest customer, if you will, because I have contacts in pretty much all the U.S. So I can get a venue, I can get a room through a law enforcement agency. But I love when they open these up to the public and bring people in, and that's when you can really start pushing this message and making force multipliers, where they take the information and they take it back to their circle of influence, their friends, their family, their Rotary Club, church, whatever, and that's ultimately what I want to do is make our community safer. I really, truly believe that. And the only way we can do that is through information. And not only just information, but taking that information and pushing it out there. We know through a lot of research that the more we talk to young people, the less likely. We're not naive to think they're not going to use drugs or alcohol or make bad decisions in their life, because we know that happens, but they're less likely to when they're armed with factual information. And going back to the parents, I've met so many parents. It's so frustrating when they say things like, if we don't talk about this, Brian, maybe they won't do it. And I'm blown away by that ignorance. I really am. They're going to see it on movies. They're going to see it. They're going to hear it in their movies. They're going to read about it on social media. Their friends are going to talk about it. Drug traffickers, they're going to get information out there, whether it's drugs, whether it's alcohol, whether it's sex, whatever it is. Why not get good information from mom and dad? Why not get good information from the family and then let them make a decision based on that? Are they going to say no? Are they going to walk away from this stuff? Maybe not. But we know through a lot of research, like I said, that they're less likely.
What is that information you recommend? Like, for example, my home, my kids know only 2 milligrams can kill you. I tell them it's like a couple granules of salt to put it in perspective. We have fentanyl strips that I have some family member that will send them. And my kids, I think we sort of emphasize that you don't know what it's in. It could be in any pill. It could be in anything that you're purchasing. So don't do it. It's not worth, even trying that pill or that drug, because it probably could be laced with fentanyl. What should we be doing in addition to that, or maybe differently?
I think that what you're doing is exactly what we need to be doing. We need to warn them. And when I have a 1-hour presentation. If some schools don't give me a 1 hour, but if they do, I have a 1-hour presentation I called Shattering Dreams. And my goal is to show how their drug supply has changed. Whether it's fair or not, when I was in high school and you were in high school, we didn't have the drugs that they have. Of course we had heroin, cocaine, methamphetamine, but your chances from dying from those drugs, pretty limited. We're talking a couple thousand people a year. And again, not minimizing those lives, but pretty off chance that you're going to die from using heroin the first couple times you use it. Now, I'm not saying life's not going to life's not going to get good because you're using it, but death is the extreme, right? The drug supply now has that. When they're picking up, their friend gives them a Percocet pill or an Adderall pill, they have no idea what's in it. If it didn't come from a real doctor or from a real pharmacist, if it just came from a friend or a drug dealer, you have no idea what you're getting. And like I said, now we know that 50% of the pills out there that have fentanyl have enough to kill you. And there are a lot of instances out there, a lot of people, a lot of kids who are experimenting with drugs, because when people experiment with drugs, statistically speaking, when they're kids, when they're teenagers, who are experimenting with drugs with fentanyl in them that can kill you the first time you use it. And that's why it's changed drug experimentation, casual drug use, recreational drug use. We've never had a drug. So that's one of the things that I do in that training. That's one of the things I tell parents all the time is have this conversation. Let them know that, hey, sorry, it's not fair, but you're playing Russian roulette every single time you try anything. It's nuts. And that's the big thing is, and I also want them to realize how little 2 milligrams is. So there's a couple things I do. One is I show a sugar packet. A sugar packet, like a sweet and low package, is typically a gram. So a gram is 1,000 milligrams. If 2 milligrams is deadly dose, then that means if that sugar packet were fentanyl, there would be 500 deadly doses in that sugar packet. So then I'll transfer that sugar packet to a little vial, and I'll hand it out because I want them to physically see what 500 deadly doses of a drug looks like. And then then we have this discussion. Now think about it, if I sprinkle a little bit into the pills that I'm making. So you know, how many of you have gotten pills on Snapchat and you split them in half, and one, you know, you hear about one child dying, the other one doesn't, because that 2 milligrams can hide anywhere on that pill, right? So I want them to have an understanding of how fentanyl has taken over our drug supply, how it's changed it, and how little it takes to kill them. Mm-hmm. You get a lot of, wow, I didn't realize, right? And hopefully when they're faced in those circumstances, they're gonna say, okay, I know this is a deadly drug, or I know there's a chance that there's a very deadly drug in this product that I'm being offered, mm-hmm. and it only takes a little tiny bit to kill me. Maybe I need to figure out a different way to.
How does the addiction rate compare to other drugs? I mean, if you get on fentanyl, yeah. What are the chances that you are able to get off fentanyl? You
can get off fentanyl. I mean, there's Suboxone. There are drugs that help you get off. It's medicated assisted treatment. It's like all drugs. It's not just getting off the drug. It's taking care of why we're on the drug, and I think that's a bigger thing. It's the cognitive behavior, right? It's did I go through some trauma? Did I go some abuse, sexual, physical, mental abuse? You know, why am I taking drugs in the first? And not that everyone uses drugs. But some people just use drugs because they want to see what it's like. They're bored. They fall to the peer pressure. But ultimately, if you fall into that substance use disorder, that addiction, we've got to wean you off the drug. And then we have to figure out if there is something there in the brain that we have to address. Fentanyl is a very powerful. I mean, it's extremely powerful. Like I said, 50 times more than heroin, right? And now we have a drug that you crave. And I mean, I've met people who. I met a young lady once who said every 4 hours she wakes up and takes fentanyl. Every 4 hours. And I thought that was pretty extreme. And then I met someone else recently, about every 90 minutes they're using the drug. That's how powerful their tolerance was. Mm-hmm.
That person's probably hasn't felt pain in a long time. You know, like any sort of bruising, any aches or pains probably be excruciating for that person.
Absolutely. In fact, that's one of the things that happens when you get into the substance use disorder, the addiction is the pain intensifies. So maybe they were using it initially to reduce pain, but they've actually made it worse. It's incredible what happens. And, you know, the follow-up on that, one of the questions I get quite a bit is, why would traffickers put such a drug into the drug supply that does all the things that we just talked about? Well, it has a very intense high. And a lot of people will tell you that are looking for fentanyl, the ones that are, you know, specifically looking for the drug, that they like that. You know, in fact, it's crazy as this sounds, but let's just say here in Chicago, you had a purple fentanyl that was killing people. You will literally have people out there looking for purple fentanyl. I mean, they're looking for the drug that killed other folks because they're looking for that experience, and it's nuts. It's from a trafficking standpoint, to answer that question I just posed as well. It's highly addictive, and it's cheap. It's potent, so that's going to make me more money. And I know people are going to die. But if I'm a high-level drug trafficker,
I'm making more often.
Money. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, I'm not surprised when somebody ODs that particular drug is in demand, because those users are understanding that to be very potent and not stepped on a bunch. And
that's exactly right.
Go get it.
Yeah, we used to see the same thing with heroin and coke and meth, and now if there's fentanyl in there, it's killing people. Yeah, that's what I want. Mm-hmm. And that's not normal behavior, right? That's not something that most of us can even understand.
Yeah, young Aaron and I were just in Baltimore for an FBI conference, and I was showing him the fentanyl fold. Super sad to see somebody in that state. You just think, my goodness, how do you fold your body like that and stand?
Yeah, the fold or the lean. I've heard it called both things, and everyone always asks, you know, how do they do that? And I don't know how the leg muscle. I've seen people fall over as well, but it's amazing how when they're under the influence of the drug, they just bend over and we know it causes respiratory depression, opioids do. And it floods the system. And when it does that, your heart starts to beat less and less and less. It's respiratory depression. And a lot of folks will just hunch over, and they call it the sleepy death if they end up dying.
Yeah.
It's devastating.
Well, Brian, I really appreciate your work. I mean, your career has just been phenomenal. But now, as a retired DEA agent, you're super involved in these boards and your foundation. Only 2 milligrams. I'm really proud to work with you and to support your foundation, because I think the work you're doing is so important, and the message that you have is so important at a time in this country. I think people aren't realizing, like, this is a national crisis.
Yeah.
It is not like cocaine or other drugs we've seen before. It is it's a strategic decision by China to put these precursors into the cartel. The cartels are wildly profitable at this point, making an unbelievable amount of money, and I don't know how we're going to stop the supply side. And so you're right, it's all about demand. It's about how do we do to what we did to cigarettes in this country, we need to do to fentanyl. We need young people to understand, like, you cannot take pills, you cannot snort powders, you can't do any of that. Don't drink drinks that aren't even closed, because you don't know what's in it.
Yep.
And we have to do to fentanyl what we did to nicotine and cigarettes.
Yeah, I agree. It's devastating. When I do my 4-hour presentation, I usually start by saying, by the time I get done with this presentation, 35 more people will be dead in this country because of drugs. Everybody kind of looks at me. A year ago, I would have said 50. Thankfully we've seen a slight reduction, but it's still 35 people. And like I said earlier, and these aren't just numbers; these are people. So I feel like I'm doing whatever I can, my piece. I know that my background, my experience, will get people in. Will put butts in the seats. So hopefully, but the job's on them. I'm just the messenger. I'm going to give them the information. I really hope they can go out and spread the message and really make the difference.
Thanks for being here today and sharing your message with us. I really appreciate you, Brian. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you.